One Pride Nation, what is going on? Welcome to the Lions Pulse with Miko. I am clearly Miko. Appreciate you guys all coming in and hanging out with me here on a Wednesday night. I am going to give you guys a minute to file in. Super excited to be able to be back here, be able to talk some more Lions. Um, First and foremost, like you guys already know the deal. As you guys come in, if you could do me the biggest favor, hit that like button on your way in and then immediately jump into the chat because I want to know who's here with me. I want to be able to have some really good Lions conversation because there's a good amount of stuff to talk about. Something that I didn't expect to talk about today, but that like it kind of just came across literally like a couple hours before we started doing this stream, but it's exciting. It's provides a certain level of clarity because I know even though the NFL draft was a couple weeks ago, there's still people out there that aren't entirely happy with some of the picks we made or when we made those picks. I've obviously been dropping like my comps videos the last couple weeks, and those have been getting a lot of engagement. And people have a lot to say about the picks that we made, about the comps that I have for some of these guys. Some of you guys agree with them, some of you disagree with them, and to be completely honest, it's all good. That's the point of having this channel. That's the point of being able to make content is to be able to engage with you guys, have a fun conversation, and talk about the team that we all love. Shout out to my guy, Big T in the building saying, "What up, though, Miko and Pride Nation?" Big T, always happy to have you here, bro. Super excited to be able to talk some more Lions with everybody else. But again, as you guys kind of come in, hit the like button, jump into the chat because, like I said, I really want to be able to have a really good conversation. Um, about our team and just to be able to kind of go back and forth a little bit. But again, like I always say, I'm here for a good time, not for a long time. So I don't want to like drag this out too long. I want to be able to jump straight in and talk about some of the topics that we have lined up for today. Obviously, like I mentioned at the top, some news broke. I don't know if it's necessarily news, but just some inside information. Um, on the NFL draft in regards to 18th overall pick Jack Campbell kind of dropped a couple hours ago. So I'm definitely going to talk about that. If you guys saw the thumbnail, we're definitely going to talk about Aaron Glenn and this defense and ideally just like what should the fans thought process be going into the season. How should we feel about Aaron Glenn? Does he need to be on the hot seat? Is this kind of like a make or break year for him? And I kind of want to give my thoughts on that. And then we're going to kind of wrap up my rookie comps with Colby Sorsdal and Antoine Green. I'm going to let you guys know up front, their comps are going to be drastically different than what you've seen in the previous. And honestly, it's not because I'm trying to disrespect them or anything of that nature. But the truth of the matter is they're a sixth and a seventh round pick, and I think their room for growth is so much larger. So that their comp is going to be different. I'm going to like have it tailored a little differently than what I've done for everybody else. Shout out Dead Fan Man saying made it in. Appreciate you. Glad to have you here, man. Yeah, and as everybody else kind of files in, yo, jump in the chat. Let me know who's here. Um, so I can kind of give you a shout out as we kind of get started here. But like I said at the top, let's start off with the news that broke just recently. Like I said, within like the last hour and a bit, which is that Jack Campbell was almost a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, um, based off of the draft footage that we were able to see from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the thought process that they were having as an organization as as they were getting closer to making their pick. And during this process, like, obviously Jack Campbell surprised us all, or Brad Holmes surprised us all by picking Jack Campbell with the 18th overall pick. And the first reaction for a lot of people was like, oh, Lions reached. This guy would have been there in the second. I had a second round grade on him, this, that, and the third. And there was a lot of back and forth. And Brad, to his credit, very much so stuck to his guns and was like, yo, we love this guy. He was the highest guy on our board at the time and we picked him. And we picked him there because they didn't believe that he was going to be available in the second round. Well, based on what we're seeing from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, like insider video of their draft process, they were down to two guys. And those two guys, ironically enough, are two guys. One of those guys actually is someone that Lions fans, I know a number of us were clamoring for, in that it was Kalijah Cansey. They were hoping that Kalijah Cansey would be there at 19 and that Detroit wouldn't take him But if we had decided to take Kalijah Kancey, Tampa Bay was fully ready to take Jack Campbell at 19. And this information that we're kind of getting, this inside information, to me kind of solidifies one Brad's stance that like, hey, this guy was a highly ranked player. This was somebody that we highly sought after because in that thought process echoed throughout the league. But it also debunks everyone who's kind of saying like, oh no, Jack Campbell will be there in the second round. I I don't think that's possible because clearly Tampa was ready to take him at 19. And if Tampa was ready to take him at 19, I believe there were other rumors that I think it was like the Giants or someone else was looking to take him somewhere in the 20s. So I don't think it really I think it kind of more so tells us like, hey, Jack was highly sought after as a draft prospect, and the Lions swooped in and got him ideally in the best place they possibly could, um, based on again how they valued him. Real quick, shout out to people in the chat. Tony Chase saying on deck. One Funky Lions fan. Evening all. What's good with you, One Funky Lions fan? Shout out Jordy Mansion saying just found this channel. Love it so far. Appreciate it, man. I hope that you continue to enjoy it. Um, Let me know if this is your first stream that you attended, if you've just been watching some of the other content that I've been doing. But again, appreciate you allowing me to be a part of your night and hanging out with us and joining in the chat. Casey saying no one knows Jack about draft success for at least a few years after the draft. It's all conjecture. And I think that's very true, right? I think um the way some of us were reacting as far as like this is a reach or this was a bad pick is very like premature because again, I've kind of said it in some of the chats that I've had with some of you guys, and some of the other videos as well as on stream is like we kind of won't be able to judge, Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell until they've actually touched the field and until they've actually put a season under their belt. If these guys go out and if Jack Campbell went out and was defensive rookie of the year, no one's going to say this was a bad pick. Everyone's going to be praising Brad Holmes and this coaching staff and this scouting department on having so much foresight into the type of player he could be and having the conviction and actually having the balls to go out and take a linebacker when that position isn't highly sought after. If Jahmyr Gibbs goes out here and is in the running for offensive rookie of the year or wins rookie of the year and is shows himself to be every bit of the explosive player we expect him to be, again, no one's going to get upset that he was taken at 12. No one's going to be upset that we took him over Bijan. If he outperforms Bijan for whatever reason, whether it's just out of natural production or God forbid, I'm not wishing anything upon Bijan, but if Bijan ends up, having an injury riddled season because he's more of that workhorse back, no one's going to no one's going to look at the Gibbs pick and be like, that was a terrible decision. So I agree with Casey in that stance that like, yo, it's going to take a few years. Obviously, I get it as fans. We want instant gratification. We want to be able to see these guys hit the field and be instant impact players. But if you listen to the way that Brad Holmes talks, if you listen to the way Dan Campbell talks about these guys, that's the expectation. The expectation is that Gibbs and Campbell and Laporta kind of come in and they hit the ground running, that they're these impact players from day one, and they do everything that they possibly can to help this team still achieve the goals that they have in front of them. One Funky Lion fan saying Tampa took Dennis the linebacker from Pitt way later. That's true. And I think that also kind of shows, I don't know if you're kind of pointing that out to say that maybe they wouldn't have taken him, but I think it kind of shows just like how drastically how big the gap was between Jack and some of these other linebackers. Clearly, Jack had a certain skill set that, again, like Brad, I think Brad had an interview today on Sirius Radio where he was kind of like saying, and I saw the article from I believe Jeff Risden had wrote, basically kind of saying like, yo, when they were doing their evaluation of Jack, they felt like he was a complete player. He wasn't just like, just this old school linebacker. Like they felt like he does, and I kind of broke it down in my comp for him. He has great coverage skills. They thought he was very good against the run. I think I'll disagree a little bit with Brad where he says like, hey, he sheds blocks well. I don't think he does it very well, but I think he has room to grow in that department. When you look at his size and his measurables, he could definitely be way better at it than what he showed at Iowa. Jordy mentioned saying, I think I think hit rate is not talked about enough. It's like 50%. If you take positional value without having a strict process for who you want, you can take a guy at a high value position who will bust. That's true. Like, so we love to talk about positional value in this sense of like, oh, you have to take, offensive tackles and defensive ends are better value than running backs and linebackers. I know for a fact, I can think of recently, just off the top of my head, defensive ends that were taken in the top 5 that were busts. Like, not like, oh, they had a bad year. Like, no, they never lived up to their draft slot. Cleveland Farrell, drafted by the Las Vegas Raiders, never lived up to the hype. Deion Jordan, a couple like years ago, drafted by the Miami Dolphins, never lived up to the hype. I would even say Jadeveon Clowney, to the hype that he had coming out of South Carolina, never really lived up to the hype. Is never quite the player that we thought he would be. But yet he was still a high value position. So I think having that conviction to be able to draft the guys that you think fit is a key thing for Brad. And last week I kind of questioned that. Like, should there be a level of concern that Brad falls in love with guys that a lot of other experts are saying, like, hey, these are not high quality players, but Brad feels very strongly about them. Well, I think when we get inside looks into other organizations like we did today with the Bucks, it kind of paints a clearer picture that, like, hey, this isn't just the Lions that are saying this. Like, it may look like that because they're the ones who made the pick, but other teams feel the same way about some of these players, and some of them were willing and are willing to make that same type of gamble. And I think Tampa's very interesting because Tampa has two very good linebackers already, or at least one. Levante David is very good. Devin White, maybe not so much. So it's like, it's kind of interesting that Devin White was a linebacker that they drafted very high in the first round a few years ago. And the fact that they were still considering drafting another middle linebacker, probably to either compete with Devin White or to take Devin White's job, kind of tells us a lot of what they kind of already what they thought of Jack Campbell, and that their thought process was probably very much in line with what the Lions thought. Now, clearly, like they say in the video, Cansey was the guy that they wanted. And if we had taken Cansey, obviously they wouldn't have gotten their top guy. Um, but then you kind of wonder, like, how much of that is just like conjecture, like they got the guy, so they kind of have to say that now. Um, but it's definitely interesting to me that you get a guy like that, and obviously there's the whole talk of like, well, was it a reach? Was it this? Was it that? And at least when you start to get an inside look at other organizations, it doesn't really look to be like that doesn't really look to be the case. Dat fan man saying all these picks can hit. This is still the anti-positional value draft. Running back, linebacker, tight end, safety. All those guys are already towards the top of pay on each positional list. If they work, it's gravy. If not, yikes. And I think that's the key. But I think what you'll also see, if these guys don't hit, I think what we just saw this past offseason where Brad Holmes traded away TJ Hawkinson, or he traded away TJ during the season. He traded away Jeff Okuda during the offseason. Brad's not afraid to move guys. If you're not living up to it, he's not going to get stuck with the bill of having to pay you, that fifth year option, or feel like he has to extend you. If you're not playing to the level that they're hoping that you're going to, they will move you and they'll take whatever picks they get. Again, TJ, I think, got moved in division, and all we got was a third round pick, I think, next year. And so it's like, again, like, you'll just do whatever you can to get that pick or get something to be able to compensate you for the future. But Jordy Mansion saying, so Holmes might reach, but he gets guys that hit. Better to overdraft a linebacker, running back than to take a DN that doesn't work out. And again, like, that was kind of my thought process, specifically with someone like Tyree Wilson. Tyree Wilson was somebody that, like, was kind of getting kicked around as a possibility for the Lions at 6. And my whole thing with Tyree Wilson, which was very similar to my argument with Trayvon Walker last year, which is, I don't like the idea of taking defensive ends that do not know how to pass rush, like, that do not have a bag of pass rush moves, and that you basically have to build them up. Because if all they have is athleticism, the minute they start piling up injuries, they become useless to you because they don't know how to effectively rush the passer, use their hands, understand leverage, and do those types of things. So in that sense, yes, if you can get again, a really highly touted running back or a highly touted linebacker that can go on the field and be impactful, then like, yo, you're doing the right thing. And obviously your coaching staff has to coach them up. They have to put them in positions to be successful. And with Jack and Gibbs and Laporta, you definitely have that. Even Branch to an extent. Jay Mommy saying Branch, Campbell, Gibbs, and Laporta are all going to play, are going to get playing time this year. Branch is the only one that I have a hard time seeing that with. And that's only because the secondary is so stacked that I'm like, I struggle to figure out where you play him. I think you could definitely squeeze him in on special teams and have him go out there and, either be a gunner or go obviously, kickoffs and stuff like that. But as far as just being on the defense and being in, every down defensive plays, I think that's going to be a little tough when it comes to Branch this year. But yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on Jack and the getting the information that like, yo, he was very much in play. Like this idea that he would have absolutely been there in the second doesn't seem to be legitimate. Um, we now have clear evidence that like, yo, another team would have taken him at 19. Like I said, I remember that there were rumors that like the Giants or someone in the 20s was also sniffing around and they would have happily taken Jack Campbell. Um, so I kind of can't be mad. I was never really mad about the pick. I was mad that we didn't take Kancey because I really liked Kalijah Kancey, but I didn't hate Jack Campbell, the football player. This kind of provides a little more clarity for me as a fan to be able to sit back and be like, you know what? It allows me to put some of that trust that I might have lost in Brad. It allows me to put it back in. And again, not saying that I lost a lot of it, but it's just I think we all do this when the draft comes around and and you see who your team picks. You either have more faith or you have a little less because as fans, we do our mock drafts, we read, we listen to certain people talk about certain players, and we start to feel as if we know a lot. And Brad has kind of talked about this in his pressers since the draft. And and I think he does it very well as a GM because he doesn't just dismiss mock drafts and he doesn't insult the fans. He's very understanding and very sympathetic to the fact that, like, yo, the fans only have this much information. And when you only have this much information, you're going to build a house around that and you're going to build a certain level of investment in that. And that can be dangerous. And so I know for me personally, like coming out of the draft, my initial thought was like, okay, I got to be better at film study and I got to be better at, if I'm going to get this invested into the draft, to look at it from all angles and not just, adopt what other people are kind of telling me. Um, Shout out to J Mommy saying, speaking of how players look, did anyone see how much bigger Hutchinson got this offseason? He's definitely spent a lot of time in the gym. That Campbell comment was hilarious. Hey, listen, I think Hutch did a video, yeah, I think it was today where he was kind of breaking down like the day in the life of like just him every day in offseason mode. And definitely looks bigger. Um, and if I'm being honest, Hutch also has the type of frame where you think like he could probably even add more size if he wanted to. He kind of like has that JJ Watt type of frame where like JJ like eventually filled out in such a way where it allowed him to have that versatility to play like inside and outside. I look at Hutch and I'm just like, yo, if he ever decided to just like bulk up, like he could easily do it, and then he would definitely have that versatility, I think, to slide inside some and then still be able to play out on the edge whenever they so decided to do that. Um, so speaking of defense, one of the other things that I really wanted to get into, um, and it's going to be like I know we're gonna have to wait and see, but when looking at this team, I find myself when I look at like again my record prediction or how successful I think this team is going to be, a lot of it for me hinges on the defense, and it hinges on can Aaron Glenn take this defense from what it was a year ago, take that momentum that they had near the end of the season, and effectively translate that to the start of the season. Because if you caught my stream on Monday, one of the things that I kind of pointed out is that in order for this team to have the season that I think a lot of us think they will, where they're able to get double digit wins, that first 6 game stretch is very important. Playing against Kansas City, Seattle, Atlanta, Green Bay, and I want to say Tampa and I'm missing somebody. There's somebody else in there after Green Bay. And then you also have the Ravens in week 7. Like that stretch is very important for the Lions to be able to go, into that Ravens game, or at least again getting ready to go into the bye, because I think they have the Ravens and then they have the Raiders before they go into their bye. Like it's really important for them to have a fast start. The last few years under Dan Campbell, they've had these slow starts where again, last year 1-6. The year before that, obviously we know how that went, like not getting a win, not getting wins until like, late into the season, and only finished the season with 3 wins. Well, one of the like coinciding factors of that is the fact that the defense just hasn't been good. And you kind of understood it the first year because there wasn't a lot with for Aaron Glenn to kind of work with, right? I think Romeo got hurt. Charles Harris was kind of coming on, but like again, you had a lot of just like kind of leftover pieces on that defense, and you were just trying to like scrap something together and see kind of like, okay, what do we have to work with? What do we have to build off of? And that was the first year that Aaron Glenn was here. So like no one was like, I don't think drastically upset about it. We kind of understood like, okay, the defense isn't good. The team itself isn't going to be very good. But going into year 2, there was a lot of talk about like, hey, we've had these guys, we've had these young guys, they understand the system. We can grow the system. We should be able to be like, um, add more twists and turns and kinks to this, to this defensive scheme to make it more effective and make it, better for these players. But then like we see the start that we have. We have a 1-6 start. The Lions are giving up nearly 30 points a game. And a lot of these games are shootouts because I mean, like fortunately the offense was playing well, but the defense was never really like holding it down until later in the season. And so when I look at that, I kind of like on one hand, there's this idea that like, you know what, Aaron Glenn was starting to get it together at the end, right? They obviously made the tough decision of firing Aubrey Pleasant, and the team ends up having that players only meeting, and they kind of rally around each other and understand that like, hey, yo, like the way we're playing, whoops, sorry, the way we're playing is going to get these coaches fired, is going to have consequences beyond ourselves and beyond our season. Like this is going to impact people's livelihood. And so now that you've fired a position coach, for me personally, the only next logical choice that you have is if this defense is bad, once again, if it has this slow start to the season, I don't think you have anyone to blame but Aaron Glenn. Because at this point in time, you start to you have to start questioning the scheme and the play calls. And there was a little bit of that like his first year where there would be certain like third and long situations, and Aaron Glenn is either not blitzing or he's blitzing everybody, and you're just like, why are you doing that in this situation when you should have a better like grasp on like what your team is doing well and how to limit certain teams. Um so that's something that like for me is something that I'm very very much kind of big on. Like I'm personally focusing on those first 6 games. If Aaron Glenn can show me something and show that this defense has improved within those first 6 games, personally, it'll give me like a huge sigh of relief that I can be able to kind of sit back and relax and feel like, you know what? Okay, maybe we'll be okay. Um, Tony Chase saying, I gave Glenn a pass in 21 based on our talent and on the defense. And he got a little room last year also, but this year I don't want to hear it. And I'm kind of right there with you. Like, I don't know how many more excuses we can kind of come up with. The only like honestly, and the only legitimate excuse that he could have, but I still wouldn't again give it to him, is like the fact that they haven't really addressed the defensive tackle position. So like he is, and for the most part, going into the season with a similar defensive tackle crew, with Aleem and Bugs probably being your starters. Obviously there's I don't even know. It's like a wish and a prayer at this point that Levi is going to be able to give you something. You obviously drafted Broderick Martin, who I covered last week, where again, he'll have that upside to be able to, relieve Aleem or Isaiah just, in run stopping situations. But outside of that, like there's not a lot of defensive tackle depth. So if Aaron Glenn were to have a gripe, it would be that. But you would also think that if he was seriously concerned about it, they would have drafted one higher. I don't know when and I don't know who, but like I think if Aaron Glenn had been like, hey, like I need a defensive tackle for my defensive system to work well, I have a hard time believing that like Brad Holmes or Dan Campbell would have just ignored that. Um, and so that's another reason why like I'm not super down on the Broderick Martin pick because I think for what Aaron Glenn wants this defense to do, Broderick Martin fits right in there. He wants to be able to stop the run and allow his DBs to kind of be able to play coverage and then allow his edge rushers to be able to collapse the pocket. And he has more depth on the edge this year than he did a year ago because more guys are healthy, and guys like Aiden and guys like James Houston are just going to be a little bit better than they were a year ago. Jordy saying, I think John Fox is a big addition. I'm hoping this means our game plans are solid and our in-game adjustments improve. Also, Glenn has versatile players, no more excuses. Again, I think that's another good point. I think the John Fox hire is a really interesting one because John Fox is obviously known for being a defensive coach. He's coached some really good defenses. He also knows the NFC North really well. So again, while these teams are different, it's still like, I don't know. It's something about divisions. Like they still, for the most part, hold true to a style of football. And the NFC North has always been known as like this black and blue division where running the ball and stopping the run is still very important. Even when, a team like Minnesota that has a Justin Jefferson, they're still like, again, not afraid to run the ball. We'll see how much that changes if they decide to move on from Dalvin Cook, but that's a conversation for another day. But I agree with you in the simple fact that also that like they've added some very versatile pieces in the secondary to where if it kind of sounded like last year, like Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell wanted to play like a more multiple hybrid style of defense that could adjust based on the teams they were playing. And I hate saying the word hybrid defense or multiple because that's obviously going to bring up a lot of bad memories about he who shall not be named. But it's clear that like by getting these guys who can play in man or play in zone or guys who can play nickel but they can also play outside or guys who can play nickel and also play safety, it gives you that matchup ability to where you should be able to go into games and not necessarily be at a disadvantage. So with that said, again, like it kind of removes the excuses from Aaron Glenn about why this defense can't be very good this upcoming year. Tony Chase saying Glenn has to account for no DT. It's a well-known weakness. He has time to adjust. Glenn is on the hot seat, period. William Barach. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Aaron Glenn's defense allowed 32 points per game the first 7 games. The last 10 allowed 20 points per game, which would have been 8th in the league. And so like that's the carryover that I need to see, right? Because I've always been of the mindset if your defense can hold opponents under 20 or 21, so basically like 3 touchdowns or less, it's your offense's responsibility to go out there to get 3 to 4 or get 4 or more touchdowns. Like however that happens, like they have to generate more points if your defense can at least hold to, again, like a 3 touchdown, like because it can happen, right? You're going to be playing some really good offenses, which I'm actually going to have a video coming out probably this weekend where I'm going to kind of list out the top offenses that I think the Lions should really be on the lookout for and that they're really going to have to prepare for. But there's some good ones on the list. Obviously, week 1 is number 1 with a bullet in Kansas City. But like you struggled with Seattle a year ago, right? And it was a bit of a shootout. And I always kind of bring this game up. It was a shootout, but if your defense had shown any amount of life, any at all, that game I think is handily like Detroit's. Like Detroit would have been able to control every aspect of that game and been able to come out of there with a win. So yeah, Def Hammond, I might have missed something, but he says why? It's not like MCDC has a history of firing coordinators, coaches, or anything. I mean, he does, like, right? Like he makes those tough decisions. I think Aaron Glenn obviously would be the toughest because he seems to have so much respect for Aaron Glenn that it would be. I think that's one of the reasons, like, it would be hard for him, right? If this defense is struggling, to be able to have to go to Aaron Glenn and be like, yo, like, you're just not getting it done. But going back to what Jordy was saying about the hiring of John Fox, I think because you didn't have another defensive mind that he can kind of bounce ideas off of, a veteran defensive mind, that should, in theory, make game planning easier. That should make game plan a little bit more crisp and a little more sound so that you can go into these matchups and feel more confident about what you have put together. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how I feel about the defense, and Aaron Glenn going forward. I have him on the hot seat. I don't I would love for him to figure it out, right? And I heard someone say it earlier when Aaron Glenn was able to kind of have his fingerprints on having a really good secondary in New Orleans. It was when he had these types of like highly versatile, defensive backs, having Marshawn Lattimore, having Chauncey Gardner Johnson, and having those kind of guys in the secondary made his job easy. So you've got guys like that now. You've actually got Chauncey Gardner Johnson back. You have a guy like Cam Sutton who's a veteran. You have Emmanuel Mosley that hopefully will be coming back from his ACL injury. And these guys have a history of, again, giving up, low completion percentages, low amount of yards, not giving up a lot of touchdowns. You'll have a young, safety and returning in Kirby Joseph. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see how Tracy Walker comes back, but obviously everything that we've seen and everything he's been posting on social media at least gives us the indication that, like, hey, he'll be good, he'll be back. Um, I'm hesitant to say better than ever because everything that I've heard about Achilles injuries, like it takes a while and they linger and they kind of creep up on you and they impact you in ways that you're not always expecting. But even then, you still have Brian Branch. So if Tracy's not ready, you have that versatility and that flexibility to decide, like, hey, do we want to play Brian at safety? Do we want to play him at nickel? Do we want to throw Chauncey back out there at safety? You have that type of flexibility to be able to do those types of things. Um, Dep Fairman saying, I think they actually think Levi might play. Also, I think Christian Corral, Cleveland Covington is specifically here to be Levi insurance as a way to take 10 to 15 reps off of Bugs. Uh, Worst case. I we talked about it when they signed Covington. I'm still not sold that he makes the team. Um, if he does, I think he would be making the team at the expense of like someone like Benito Jones. Like I don't think you keep both of those guys. I don't think you keep like a Benito Jones and a Covington. Um, though I will say, I think I said it before, like physically, like looking at Christian Covington, dude is like a unit of a man. Like he is a defensive tackle. I don't know why they keep putting defensive end. I guess he could play like that big defensive end in like a 3-4 type of defense, but he is a massive individual. So there's at least some hope that, if he's going to make the roster, I think it's at the expense of someone like Benito Jones. But then I think they're going to do everything they possibly can in Levi's case to have him ready to play and at least be able to see what they have in him because they haven't been able to do that. He's been dealing with injuries since we've drafted him. And at this point in time, like this is a make or break year for Levi as well. Like either he's going to contribute and they'll find a way to be able to keep him long term, or he's going to continue to struggle with injuries. Unfortunately, like some of the defensive tackles we've taken in the past, and he's probably going to, be finding himself looking for a new home at the end of this season. Um, One funky Lion fan saying no running backs ran the ball for anything the last 10 games except Carr. Oh, except for Carolina. The run defense up the middle was more than fine. I don't know why this narrative hang around. Like, did people not pay attention? No, I don't think it's that we didn't pay attention. I think that's why, like I said, like how it started, like if he can translate that from how it ended, I'm all for it. But how it started was not what you wanted. And it's not just the defensive line, because I agree with you. I think one of the reasons that Isaiah Buggs got re-signed is because he did his job very well. Whatever they were expecting Isaiah Buggs to do, which is primarily be a run stuffer, he did that. And I think that's what Aaron Glenn wants his defensive linemen to do. His defensive tackles is to plug lanes, and when you have opportunities to, beat the guard or beat the center, yeah, beat them and get in the backfield and make a stop. But for the most part, it's always to stop the run and allow your edges to be explosive and to be able to create pressure on the edges. Um, I don't think, and I think that's, I mean, if we're looking back, going back to the Jack Campbell thing, as far as the Lions taking Campbell over Cansey, it kind of lends itself to why they didn't pick Kalijah Cansey, because Kalijah Cansey is more of like an attacking defensive tackle, right? He's not necessarily like known for being a great run stuffer. He's more of, the type of like quote unquote Aaron Donald type of defensive tackle where he wants to be able to, get in the backfield, get a sack or two here or there. Maybe he blows up a run play, but like he's not going to sit there and stack and shed and do that type of he's not going to run that style of defense for you. So, like I said, for me, Aaron Glenn is on the hot seat. I think those first 6 games are going to be really, really important for him. And as far as like the season as a totality, like I want to keep the bar for Aaron Glenn fair. Like I don't want to sit here and be like, well, yeah, you had the worst defense last year, so you need to have a top 5 defense this year. No, but I think seeing this defense go somewhere in the range of 15 to 20 after being literally at the bottom and seeing them climb to like being like somewhere between 15th and 20th total defense in certain every category that we possibly can, pass defense, run defense, touchdowns given up, like things like that, points given up, like having them in that range first of all, gives you a much better chance of believing like, hey, this team not only can make it to the playoffs, but if they get in the playoffs, they can make some noise because that's when defense really matters. So for me, like if we're looking at like, okay, first 6 games, really important as far as like the like Aaron Glenn's future after the season, I think that's going to have to be one of the measuring sticks is like, okay, did this defense improve enough? Right. For me, I don't know if going from 32 to like the 25th, defense in all those categories necessarily shows enough improvement. It is improvement. I'm not going to sit here and act like it's not. I just don't know if it's enough improvement for me personally. Um, but with that said, don't want to harp on the Aaron Glenn topic too much. I do want to get into my rookie comparisons. These are a little bit shorter, so like I said at the beginning of the show, I did these differently because again, Colby Sorsdal and Antoine Green are 6th and 7th round picks. And not to say that 6th and 7th round picks can't turn into something in the league and that they can't um, obviously go on to have amazing careers. Obviously, Brock Purdy is a great example of that. Tom Brady is a unicorn, but like I guess if you wanted to use that as an example, like that's there. Quandre Diggs, Malcolm Rodriguez, like guys have been drafted in later rounds and obviously been able to still build solid careers. But specifically for Colby Sorsdal, I wanted to more so just focus on like pros and cons because, like I said, first and foremost, it's a 6th round pick, so my expectations aren't extremely high. Um, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't develop into something more. But I think looking at where he currently is probably just a better way of evaluating him and then being able to just say like, hey, he can be a starter or he's going to be a bench guy forever or just long-term development project. I think it's better to categorize him in that context than to try to find some offensive lineman in the NFL and be like, oh, he's going to be that guy. Also, full transparency, I'm not that familiar with offensive lineman play. So like it would be disingenuous for me to come on here and tell you guys like, hey, Kobe Sorsdal is going to be the next Creed Humphrey or something. Like, I don't know. Like it would be so disingenuous of me for me to do that. So I'm not even going to pretend that I understand how offensive linemen develop and things of that nature. Um, but before I dive into the debt famine, you have a really good question. So what would be an acceptable amount of points allowed versus Kansas City week 1 for AG? I'm still gonna say like 28. Like you can't go into Kansas City and give up 30 plus, right? Like that's not the way you want to start the season. Even if they win, like they could win 38-30. Like the Lions could win 39-38, and I'd still be like, yeah, but that defense looked rough. Like so I think you still want to be able to see them be competitive. Now, again, Patrick Mahomes is going to do Patrick Mahomes things, so I'm not going to sit here and act as um if they do go up there and give up like lucky funky Lions fans saying it, like they go in there and they give up, you know, 51-48 or something like that, then like you kind of have to live with it because it's the Chiefs, right? Like, so I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, they gotta get rid of AG. No, but like we'll sit here and be like, okay, that's the Chiefs. You gave up that many points to the Chiefs. Cool. Do not let Seattle come in here the week after and put up 40 plus again. Like that's unacceptable because now it's just like, okay, now this feels like deja vu. Um, because I just don't think that like it's not realistic in the NFL to win games like that. You can't give up that many points, have your defense on the field like that, getting exposed, and think that they're going to be able to put up, still be competitive at the end of the day. Oh, shout out to Mac Stag joining the stream. Appreciate you, bro, for coming by. Um, so yeah, Colby Sorsdal evaluation. So here are the pros of some of the tape that I watched from Colby Sorsdal. Dude is a fantastic run blocker, I think. I think he is very good in the run game, and it kind of shows why they're moving him to guard. I don't think he was a terrible tackle. I don't think he was a bad tackle by any stretch at William and Mary, but when you look at how he attacks the run game, it's almost like, dude, like if they could have slid him inside, you just kind of get this feeling like he would have destroyed people from that position. Obviously, he's never played guard and he's gonna have to kind of learn it, but when you look at what he was doing at William and Mary and just their kind of calling card as a team, because they were a very good team, it was running the ball, and he was a very good contributor in that context. Um, Again, he has these nasty streaks that you want to be able to see in your offensive lineman, where again he can finish guys or he can just kind of bully guys that are smaller than him. He doesn't. You don't see a lot of snaps where he's getting blown up in the run game, specifically. Um, and to a certain degree, not so much in the pass game either, though. Like so, like his pass protection is fine. It's strong. It's solid. Like I said, you don't see him getting driven back, which is something that you absolutely want to be on the lookout for when you're looking at offensive linemen. Is okay, can they actually anchor? Can they actually be able to take a guy bull rushing him, or do they themselves get manhandled? You don't see a lot of that with Colby Sorsdal. He doesn't get manhandled like that. Um, so I would be those are some of the things that kind of have me excited about him as far as the pros. Um, William saying talk to one of Colby's former QBs who's now a coach, gave me a quote. Incredible person, super hard worker, athletic as hell, soaks culture up like a sponge. And that's kind of like, again, that's kind of what you want to hear from a 6th round pick, is that, you know what, he's going to come in here, he's going to, endear himself to his teammates, he's going to be a great, person, he's going to work hard. And to me, like, so when looking at his pros, like I said, while I may not be able to attach him to a player, I think he has the tools and the makeup to where if he continues to develop, if he continues to, like, really, the one thing that I would say that he needs to do is add more strength, which is it's not a knock. I mean, he's coming from an FCS school, so he's not playing against obviously the best of talent. He may not have like the best of workout facilities and things like that, but like adding strength is going to be huge for him, coming from a smaller school and now going straight into the league, is to be able to add that strength, because you're going to go against defensive linemen that can really put it on you. If you line up opposite of Kenny Clark, like Kenny Clark is going to give you some work if you're not ready for it physically. So um, I'm I'm optimistic about Colby's, future here. Obviously, like I said, he's learning a new position, and that's one of the cons that I kind of have for him, is that, like, it's not his fault, but again, he played tackle, but he definitely has a better skill set and kind of frame and body and play style that fits guard. So one of the cons is that, like, you're gonna have to be patient with his development. He's probably not gonna be ready to contribute or be in that competition for one of the guard spots, since Vitae and Graham are clearly going to be the main two that are going to be vying for that position. But you at least should feel good about Sorsdal and the wings. I think he'll be a better, like, quote unquote project, or he'll be a better developmental player than Logan Stenberg was or has been. So I think, like, this is somebody that you can wait on and it's actually going to pay off. Like, it's not something like, oh, we're waiting and seeing. Like, he has the tools to where you can feel confident that, like, maybe in a year or two, depending on how things go with Vitae, depending on how things go with Glasgow, that if it doesn't translate, if you, or I'm sorry, if those two guys, kind of fizzle out, or if you decide that you don't want to pay them big money or whatever the case may be, you have a young rookie that you feel confident that you can kind of, throw into the fire and kind of start to develop him that way. Um, Jordy saying, does that mean Matt Nelson is our backup tackle, or would we move Big V to tackle and put Colby slash Glasgow at guard? So I think Glasgow and Big V are going to battle it out at guard, right? For the time being. Matt Nelson, I think they like they have a role for Matt Nelson, and Matt Nelson will probably continue to have that role. However, I do think Colby could probably challenge him for that backup role, because again, I'm not sure how many. We'll probably have to get into this in another stream, as far as like what the 53 man roster may look like, as far as like how many offensive linemen they may try to carry. But Colby could absolutely do what Matt Nelson does, which is come in when they're trying to have that six extra offensive linemen, and be that extra push that they need in running situations, because again, he does that really well. Um, so it's something that I would definitely look, kind of keep an eye on, in that case. Um, oh, another one of so going back to kind of Colby's, cons and things that are, again, like they're not huge red flags, because again, he's a 6th round pick and he's a rookie. He's gonna have to develop. He's gonna have to work on these things. Um, I think sometimes, like again, he has these moments when he has a nasty streak, but then there's other times where like one of the most enjoyable things when you're watching like really good offensive line play is when a guy just like literally goes whistle to whistle. Like the play is clearly away from him, but he is determined to drive whatever guy he's blocking like out of the play. Um, I think there's times where you see in Colby's tape where he kind of like he'll let up, like, okay, like the play's away from me, so I'll kind of just like let up a little bit. Um, I'm not saying I want him to go out there and get penalties, but I just like you kind of just would love to see that motor kind of still going, um further into the play. Or if he's blocked one guy and moved them out the way, going to find the next guy and be like, all right, I'm gonna block that dude next. Um, I don't think you kind of see enough of that. One other thing is that again, sometimes his hands have the tendency to get caught outside. This is more so on pass rush situations when guys are coming at him. Um, and again, I think that's kind of will change. That will become easier for him when he's working as a guard, because he's more compact and everything is literally right in front of him. So he doesn't have to worry about guys trying to like, bend outside or trying to like kick out and stay in front of guys. Everything is literally going to be right there in his grill. So it'll be easier for him to kind of just adjust and take on blocks a little more soundly, and hopefully keep his hands inside. Because like I said, he has the power to kind of move guys in the run game. Like again, whether it's just like sealing guys off or pushing them back a few yards, he definitely has that, in spades, in my opinion. Um, William saying Kobe has nearly 2,000 reps at right tackle. If needed, he could be decent as a swing tackle. Absolutely. And I think that's the other thing too. If they believe that he could eventually play right tackle, so this is looking like super far in advance. What you could potentially see is if Taylor decides to retire in the next few years, right? You could then have the flexibility to move Panay back to left and Sorsdal to right, because he's played it for so long, so he has the repetitions and he has the snaps, um, from William and Mary to be able to make that type of transition. Um, Jay Mommy, in regards to Glasgow, because I know that was brought up as far as him playing guard. So like Glasgow was brought back because he can play multiple position. It's a Michigan thing. Again, absolutely right. Again, that versatility, so that Graham can play center, he can play guard. Um, I think, like I said, I fully expect him to be in the competition with Big V for that starting guard spot. Um, I don't know who I would actually take in the edge of that one right now. I know they really like Big V. And when Big V's been healthy and hasn't had to deal with back issues and things like that, he's proven to be really good. So we'll have to see how like sitting out a year really kind of impacts him and hinders his game, or if it impacts his game at all. So yeah, all in all, like I think Colby Sorsdal will like, I guess at his ceiling, right? Like again, I don't have a player comp for him as a ceiling, but as a ceiling, I think you could actually have a starter. You absolutely could have somebody who could be, on that offensive line starting in the next year or two, next to Panay and next to Frank, and you would still have a really good offensive line. Probably worst case scenario is he's probably Matt Nelson, right? He's probably a guy that you probably keep on the roster and you use him as a swing tackle and you use him in situations on goal line when you're trying to get that extra push. Um, and he continues to kind of just be that good teammate in that respect. Um, Tony Chase saying our line has a nasty mentality. Nasty mentality. They're not going to accept nothing less from Colby, and that's so not just the offensive line has a nasty mentality. The wide receiver group also has one, and we're going to get into that when we start talking about Antoine Green. Um, Jordy saying, okay, nice, because we could probably slide Sewell to left tackle and use Colby at right. Yeah. Or put him at right if Sewell goes down. So like, yeah, you have that versatility, right? You have the flexibility that if something were to go wrong on this offensive line, you have guys who can fill in and kind of help out, and so that there's not this huge drop off in productivity. Um, so yeah, wanting to jump into all right. So let's now talk about Antoine Green, right? So Antoine Green, once again, I'm also just going to do pros and cons because um again, it's a seventh round pick, and Antoine has a lot of he has a lot of growth that he needs to do in his game. Um, to be able for me to be able to say like, hey, he reminds me of this player. I'm not gonna lie, when I was watching his tape and looking at some of like his highlight reels and looking at some of the tough catches he makes, I did get hints of Marvin Jones, just in the fact that like again, great vertical threat. Um, really like fights for the ball when it's in the air, and a lot of situations I saw like when it's up there like it's his. um Again, big body, kind of like Marvin. I think they're about the same height, 6'2". So those are things that you really like about Antoine has the speed to be that vertical threat. So obviously we all know that we're going to be missing JMO for the first 6 weeks of the season. Antoine's somebody that you can kind of run on those type of go routes or these deep posts, and you would probably feel really confident that like, hey, not only can he get open, but like even if it's a contested catch, he's going to fight for the ball, and that's something that you love in a receiver, and you love in a deep threat. It's like, hey, it's not just like when the ball's in the air, it's mine. He kind of seems to have that mentality when you watch him play. He also has like just again like naturally strong hands. Again, like he didn't get um I'll talk about it in the cons. I'll bring this back up in the cons, but like he doesn't get a lot of opportunities in like these shorter, routes, short mid-range routes. But when he did, like again, whether it's contested or just again just showing strong hands and the ability to catch it, come down with it in a number of really difficult situations. Um, so yeah, I really like Antoine Green. Like I said, if I really had to like put a put a player to it, like as of right now, like the best he could probably be for you this season is like a diet version of Marvin Jones. I think he could do a lot of the same things that you would probably ask Marvin to do this year. Um, but there's a lot of development that he kind of needs to go through to be like a true contributor to this wide receiver room. Um, and so that kind of leads me into some of the cons. And some of the cons, I don't know if it's necessarily like Antoine's skill set or how North Carolina chose to use him, because North Carolina wasn't like this like crazy air raid offense. Like they did run underneath concepts, they did run slants, they did run screens and things like that. They did run curl routes, like and all that type of stuff. But it's like a lot of the passes that you see go to Antoine are these deep shots. They kind of use him as a clear out. Uh, I believe the wide receiver was Josh Downs out of North Carolina as well, his teammate that got drafted. They kind of use him as that for like, again, as a clear out or a decoy or things like that. Um, so for me, like a con is that like I start to kind of question when you're not utilized in all aspects of the passing game. I question whether that's just purely like a scheme thing, or if it's schemed that way because you have limitations in your route running. Um, and I think that's something that, like, regardless of what it is, Antoine's going to have to be able to prove that to this coaching staff that, like, hey, I can do more than run a go route. I can do more than run a fade. I can do more than run a deep post or a deep comeback. I can run slants. I can run, well, he can run a curl route. I did see him do that plenty of times, but like, hey, I can take a screen. I can do this and that. Um, we talked about this, Tony. You kind of mentioned it in your comment when you were like, "Hey, the offensive line has a nasty mentality. They're not going to take anybody that isn't going to have that mentality." Well, the wide receivers are going to have to do the same thing with Antoine Green, because Antoine Green can get a little lazy in his blocking. And if you're a Lions fan, if you've watched any Lions football, you know like that's a staple of Dan Campbell and this coaching staff, is that like, and Coach Randall L, is that like, hey, wide receivers, we block. If it's a screen pass, if it's a running play, if just because you don't have the ball, you should still be blocking somebody. So I think Antoine's going to get that like he's going to learn that lesson very early from guys like Saint and from guys like Josh Reynolds, because they go out there and block, and he'll learn it from Marvin because again, Marvin's a veteran. He understands that like, hey, you play at to the end of the whistle, and so you see that that show up in tape in North Carolina, where again a run's maybe not coming towards him, or he's not necessarily like involved in the running play. So like he kind of just runs a route as a decoy, but he's not looking to come back and block a corner or try to come in and block a linebacker to help his running back get those additional yards. Um, so it's definitely a mentality. I think it's something that he will learn early on because again, uh, for Detroit, it's not an option. Blocking as a wide receiver is not an option whatsoever. Um, Jordy, I agree with you. Not blocking equals not getting on the field. He's gonna have to learn quick. Exactly. If he wants to get on the field, if he wants to play, you're gonna have to go out there and block. Tony, yeah, even JMO, like JMO is frail, right? Not a big body, but he will still go out there and throw down with anybody. So again, I don't think it's going to be hard for Antoine to learn this lesson. Like everybody does it. No one is exempt from this idea of blocking, and he has the frame to do it well. Like again, he's 6'2", looks like he's like built really well. So there's no reason why he can't be out there and be a more effective blocker for his teammates. And the last con that I kind of have for him is just his run after the catch seems a little limited. Again, it's a lot of deep passes, him coming down with the ball, but even on those shorter routes where he's coming down, catching a curl, running a short dig route or something like that, he doesn't show like a lot of wiggle. He doesn't show the ability to necessarily power through tacklers. And I'm not saying that you need that, but like it would be nice, right? Because we know how this offense, functions where, they run the ball, they go play action, and obviously they're going to look for their deep shots. But if you can operate over the middle as well, right? If you can catch a post route and not just outrun a safety or a corner, but actually like beat them one on one, you become more valuable to your team. So that is something that like again, he can work on, he can develop. I don't know if he'll ever become elite at it, but he can definitely become better at it. And I think some of it is also just, um, again, opportunities. I don't think he's gotten enough opportunities at North Carolina to maybe showcase that or to develop that. But I think it's something that the Lions will focus on for him to help him be successful if he wants to be that. If he wants to kind of, if he has that dog mentality, which I believe he does, because like I said, you watch him with any jump ball, he has that like it's mine mentality. Um, and so like I think there's a lot to work with in that respect. Um, forgive me if I say this wrong. Akia says Antoine Green should be wide receiver four. Sterling Thomas the fourth should be cornerback four, and on Saint. Or I don't know if you finished your message there, but like I have yet to talk about any of the I have yet to talk about any of the UDFAs. Sterling Thomas, though, is somebody that I've heard a lot about. And if he makes this roster, from what I've heard, he will be a special teams player, right? So yeah, kind of like what you're saying, special teams. So yeah, if he does make the team, like it's going to be in special teams because I've heard from good friends over at Pride of Detroit, watching some of their streams. Um, he was lighting it up in mini camp on special teams. Like every drill that he was involved in, he won. And knowing anything about Dan Campbell, knowing anything about this coaching staff, like that's the kind of stuff that's going to endear you to this team. That's going to endear you to the leadership of this team is that like, yo, if you can go out there and you can contribute on special teams, they can find a spot for you because not everybody is willing to do that dirty work, and get out there and again cover kicks, cover punts, go out there and hit people, and be happy about it. Again, because some guys will sure they'll try it out there on special teams, but like they have their mind elsewhere. They have their mind looking to like, okay, this is only a stepping stone. That's one thing I always thought was funny about JMO, as far as like the profile on him, where he was like, yo, he would go out there and cover kicks if he wanted to, if they wanted him to. Like that's when the Lions talk about they want guys who love football, like that's a prime example of it. So I would agree, Akia, that I think Antoine Green should absolutely be wide receiver for. I don't think there's any reason why wide receiver 4 with JMO out. I think Marvin's probably gonna, like, again, when the whole crew is there, obviously you'll have Saint, JMO, Josh Reynolds, and Marvin. Those will be your first 4. You'll obviously have Khalif, and then after Khalif, if they decide to keep a 6th, I think it is Antoine Green. I know a lot of people love Tom Kennedy, and Tom Kennedy's always gonna make, like, that's the greatest testament that if you, like, if you really wanna make this roster at wide receiver, Tom Kennedy's the guy that you gotta beat. Because he's going to always kind of be in the mix because he kind of always does everything right from a wide receiver perspective. But if Antoine can prove to be a solid wide receiver, but also add value on special teams, that'll go a long way. Um, okay, you think about 3 to 4 UDFAs. Okay, so let's talk about this really quick because I've been going back and forth about how I feel about the UDFAs this year. Um, I like some of them, right? I love Ibrahim, the running back out of Minnesota. I love Starling Thomas. Uh, there was a Thompson, the, like, wide receiver slash tight end slash quarterback, like whatever the heck he is out of Virginia, is interesting to me. And I've heard there's been some pretty good things about some of the linebackers as well. Um, so I think there's some interesting pieces. I have a hard time figuring where they fit. In years past, I feel like there's always been enough space on this roster where you're like, "Oh, yeah, somebody's getting bounced for this guy." Um, Ibrahim probably has the best shot at running back just because, um, Craig Reynolds, like, obviously dealt with injuries last year, but even when he wasn't dealing with injuries, like, even when he was healthy again, like, I don't remember him getting a lot of run. So he's probably gonna have to fight for a position, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Like, if that's the case and he ends up losing that position, I'm gonna miss Craig because he brought some really great moments during that 21 season when things weren't looking good, but, like, he was one of the few bright spots. But at the same time, like, that's how tough and that's how cutthroat this roster is about to be, um, as they continue to kind of add pieces here and there. Um, Starling Thomas is somebody that, like, absolutely could kind of squeak in there as a corner. Again, he may primarily be like a special teams guy, but um, I'm all for that as well. Again, Dan talks about winning in all 3 phases, and in order to win in all 3 phases, you need guys that are willing to sell out and be committed, and own their job in those situations. So if you can get a guy like Thomas, and he beats out one of your corners, Will Harris, Chase Lucas, type of person, if he beats out, I mean, if he's probably really much very much on the bubble. I know they've kind of moved him to safety, but again, depending on how many defensive backs you want to keep, because so many of these guys can play corner and safety, we're really going to have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, I think when I look at this UDFA class, I can see maybe 2 guys currently. I can see 2 guys maybe making it. Um, but who knows? Again, I haven't heard anything about any defensive tackles. I think that would probably, like, that's the group where I think somebody could really kind of, surprise us and kind of make their way onto the team. Um, Wide receiver, not so much. I think Antoine Green as a draft pick will kind of have the inside track of any UDFA wide receiver that they've brought in. And linebackers, maybe. I think it's going to be really hard to unseat an Anthony Pittman or because I think they still do really like Derek Barnes. Malcolm Rodriguez is somebody that they still are going to have a role for. Obviously, you have Jack and you have Alex Anzalone. I'm not sure. And then they signed Jalen Reeves-Maybin. So, like, you have veteran linebackers that also play special teams really well. So, like, it's going to be an uphill battle for any of those UDFA linebackers. J Mommy saying Laporta is going to be playing a lot of receiver while JMO is is all on his suspension. Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, if you go back and you watch Sam Laporta's tape, he lines up outside at wide receiver quite a bit, and he's great coming off the line, right? It was one of the things that I said in his comparison. Like, that's one of his strengths is that um, probably one of the better tight ends that I've seen come out of college. Again, at just getting off the line, even though, like, at that size and at that position. So whether it's inline or flexed out wide, he kind of has that versatility. So I'm super excited to see Sam. It was really cool to kind of hear that he was kind of the star of rookie minicamp and that he was kind of turning a lot of heads. So super excited about that. Um, I'm hoping to do a video kind of soon where I kind of just break down like my expectations of every rookie. Now that I've done their comparisons, now that I've said like, okay, this is who I think their floor and their ceilings are. Um, I now want to be able to kind of take that information and kind of just set some reasonable expectations, what I think that they could do in their rookie years, um, kind of compare them to what other rookies have done, and what I think is actually feasible for each of them. But yeah, so like always, guys, I appreciate you all coming through. Please be sure to hit that like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Again, I look to stream at least twice a week, looking to upload, at least 2 to 3 videos as well a week. So there's going to be plenty of content for you guys. If you're watching this on demand, trust me, I'm going to try to be uploading just clips of this so that you don't have to sit here for the whole hour if you don't have the time. But yeah, I appreciate you guys. You guys make this so much fun. And I can't wait to be able to come back and hang out with you guys on Monday for the next live stream. So hope you have a good week, have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys on Monday.